Reborn in Marvel, marrying Scarlet Witch unlocks overpowered treasures. Episode 11, Magneto, Brotherhood. Sumo's expression changed when he saw Jean being rushing towards Wanda. Get away. He ducked in front of Wanda. The sword in his right hand was swung out with all his strength. In desperation, the first level of the Thunder Sword's force appeared in his mind. A glimmer of understanding emerged in his mind. Naturally, strength surged out of the right hand wielding the sword again. The speed of the sword was directly accelerated by 60%. Jean Bing, who was originally confident that he could block Sumo, had a look of horror on his face after he noticed it. No. In Jean Bing's widened eyes, the sword slashed hard on his neck. Poof. Just like cutting tofu, the sword passed by as lightly as nothing. Jean Bing's expression froze instantly. Then, his head slowly fell to the ground. Kill the villain and get 10,000 points. The system prompts appeared in Sumo's mind. Sumo's eyes lit up as he was immersed in the first level of joy of practicing the Thunder Sword. You are indeed worthy of being the ruler of Hell's Kitchen, worthy of hundreds of minions. Are you okay? At this time, Wanda came forward from behind. When Sumo heard Wanda's voice, his eyes moved, and then his face instantly turned a little pale. His body softened and he was about to fall back. When Wanda saw this, she quickly stretched out her hand to support him. What's wrong with you? Sumo fell on top of her, looked at the worried look on her face, and tried his best to smile. I'm fine, I'm just a little exhausted. Although the system has been activated now, Sumo has not forgotten that chaos force still exists in Wanda's body. It is uncertain when this chaos force will awaken. If the other party suddenly awakens at some point, he is not sure what the other party's attitude will be towards him. He not only threatened the other party before, but also took away the other party's first time. It is obviously impossible to say that Wanda does not hold some grudge against herself. Naturally, he would not give up this great opportunity to increase his favorability. Seeing Sumo going through danger in order to save the two siblings, Wanda also felt a warmth in her heart. Thanks. I'll help you back. As she spoke, Wanda helped Sumo walk towards the car. At this moment, the sound of explosions came from behind them. A black figure crashed through the window, flew out of the building, and fell to the ground. The three people turned and looked over. Natasha Romanoff covered her back and slowly stood up from the ground. By GA, my back. Before Sumo and the others could figure out the situation, a man stronger than Kingpin walked out of the building. The man wears a metal helmet on his head. Glancing at Jean Bing, who was lying on the ground with his body and head separated, the man's angry eyes fell on Sumo and the other three. Did you kill this person? Damn bastard, if you kill him, where will I collect the money? If you can't receive the money, then. The man babbled to himself. Seeing this, Sumo turned towards Natasha Romanoff, who was standing aside, and stretched out his hand to make gestures. That means, where did you provoke this madman? Natasha Romanoff spread her hands. Obviously, she didn't know where this madman came from. After muttering alone for a long time, the man looked at Sumo and the others again. Since you have killed him, I will take you back to deal with him. After saying that, the man raised his foot and slammed it on the ground. Boom. At this moment, the entire ground rolled, and there was like an earth dragon rolling in the direction of Sumo and the others. See this scene. Sumo was shocked. Walk. After saying that, he directly took Wanda and Pietro with one hand and flew away towards the distance. When Natasha Romanoff saw this, her expression changed, and she turned around and fled in the other direction. The man who was wearing a helmet and didn't seem to have a clear mind saw this and chased Sumo in the direction. However, although he can trample the ground like an earthquake with a casual kick, his speed does not seem to match his strength, and it only seems to reach the limit of human beings. Although Sumo brought two people with him, he still quickly got rid of this person. Sitting in the back seat of a commercial vehicle, Sumo let out a sigh of relief. Judging from the destructive power caused by the man just now, the force was at least over 50 tons. Obviously it's not something he can deal with now. He frowned slightly, a look of thought flashing in his eyes. He has a low IQ, great strength, and wears a helmet on his head. From these points alone, Sumo could guess the identity of the other party. The only one who seems to fit these criteria is the red tank who has gained the power of the evil god Sidorak, Kane Marco. But why did the other party appear in Jean Bin's base camp? Recalling what he said before. During this time, Jean and others were crazy about making money through kidnapping and extortion. Kingpin clearly plays for the organization. Brotherhood of Mutants? All he could think about was this organization. After all, Red Tank had only joined a few organizations. This is also the organization most likely to do such a thing. But no matter what organization it is likely that it has been exposed to the other party's site. Next, I have to improve my strength as soon as possible. Thinking of this, Suemo took out his cell phone and dialed Sauron's number. Kingpin is dead, spread the word and cause chaos in the gangs of Hell's Kitchen as soon as possible. Knack Island. About 300 nautical miles away from New York is a file-sized island of more than 10 square kilometers. The headquarters of the Brotherhood of Mutants is located on this island. Located in a building on the east coast of the island. Red Tank looked at an old man sitting at the top. The old man also wore a metal helmet on his head. His identity is self-evident, he is the famous Magneto. Kingpin is dead. Where's the money? Eric didn't care about Kingpin's death. In his opinion, the other party was just a tool to help them collect dollars. Hearing this, Red Tank's face was stunned. Have no idea. Eric was not surprised by this answer and waved helplessly towards the other party. Forget it, go back and rest first. He knows that the opponent's brain is not normal, but among the current Brotherhood, his ability is still recovering due to the mutant antidote. Only Hong can steadily suppress Jean Ben and is not afraid of the opponent's methods. Tanked. For this purpose, he also sent another mutant to accompany him. Because of what happened at the Golden Gate Bridge last time, after he was injected with the mutant antidote, his ability disappeared. Without him, all surviving members of the Brotherhood are wanted by the government. Like rats in the sewer, hiding here and there. It wasn't until he regained some of his abilities that he reunited these people. Eric turned to look at a girl sitting in the corner, playing with the computer. Check it out and find out what's going on. No problem, give me some time. The girl showed a confident smile, and then quickly started typing on the keyboard with her hands. Episode 12, Exchange for Spiritual Core, the next period of time. Because of Kingpin's death and the instigation of Sauron and the others, Hell's Kitchen fell into chaos. Every day and night, there are intermittent sounds of gunshots and police cars in this area. However, the government has not taken any measures in this regard. After all, those who died were some gang members from Hell's Kitchen. They really want all those scum to die. This morning. In the Manor Villa. Suemo walked out of the bedroom in a daze. In the living room. Wanda was wearing pajamas and was busy in the kitchen. Hearing the voice behind her, she turned her head and saw Suemo walking out, with a sweet smile on her face. You're awake. Suemo stepped forward and hugged her from behind. Why don't you cook by yourself today? You can just leave these things to the servants. But I want to do it myself. He took Sumo's mischievous hand away, and then glanced at her angrily. Okay, let's go wash up first. Breakfast will be ready soon. All right. Suemo could only leave the kitchen and walk towards the bathroom. Since rescuing Pietro last time, the relationship between the two can be said to have developed by leaps and bounds. Wanda seemed to accept him completely. It has to be said that women like Wanda and others who have lacked love since childhood are particularly easy to be impressed. As long as you give her a good point, she will be eager to repay you with 10 points. What's more, in her opinion, Suemo risked his life to save Pietro. When Suemo returned to the restaurant again, breakfast was already on the table. Looking at the steamed buns and rice porridge on the table, Suemo seemed to have seen a ghost. You did it. Certainly. Wanda tightened her hair. I heard from the servant that you only like to eat Chinese food, so I tried to make some. It's my first time making it and I don't know how it tastes. Looks great. Suemo looked at the other party's sweet smile and praised him. Sure enough, even if we put aside the rewards of the system, if we were to pick out the most suitable person to be a wife from Marvel, it would undoubtedly be Wanda. After all, the other person's lifelong dream is just to have 2 children. The family finds a peaceful and comfortable life in a small town. This point is in line with the Chinese people's definition of a good wife and mother. The most important thing is that the other party is still so approachable. Sitting at the dining table, I picked up a bun and took a bite. Beef stuffing. The taste is surprisingly good. By the way, why haven't you seen Pete during this time? Hearing this, Wanda showed a look of helplessness on her face. He found a job in Queens and rented a house. Now he has to go to work during the day and study the secret book you taught him at night. He hasn't been back for a long time. If I hadn't gone to see him 2 days ago when he visited, I thought he had been kidnapped again. Suemo also felt a little helpless about this matter. Whether it was the money he gave or the house and job he arranged for the other party, Peter firmly refused to accept it. The money was resolutely returned to Sumo after rescuing him. According to his words, it was because he didn't understand Sumo that he accepted the money and wanted to give Wanda a guarantee. But after what happened last time, he had completely trusted Sumo's character. Naturally, this security deposit is not necessary. And he felt that he could support himself without relying on Sumo's help. In this regard, Sumo could only lament that this brother-in-law was quite a good person. I lamented the other party's persistence in Kung Fu. Sumo handed him the gene energy cultivation method and asked him to study it first. After all, there are many Chinese-specific nouns in it, which he needs to slowly understand. He also gave him a large portion of ferocious beast meat to slowly eat to improve his physical fitness. After his strength reaches the level of a quasi-warrior, he can start training directly. But these are alternatives. In contrast, Sumo still preferred to let Wanda and the others follow their original trajectory and awaken their abilities. With origin magic power and extreme speed, the two of them are strong enough to protect themselves. In the gym, Sumo looked at a document in his hand. These are all collected by Sauron during this period, about the situation of various forces in Hell's Kitchen. Under the agitation of their 9 people, almost all gangs have been seriously injured. The members of large gangs have been reduced by at least half, and some small gangs have been directly wiped out. Hell's Kitchen has also ushered in the safest period in more than 10 years. Open the system panel. Look at the points column above. 31,960 points. This is the cumulative number of points earned during this period. Gang members in Hell's Kitchen, in this turmoil, the death toll reached thousands one after another. Because the deaths of these people were indirectly caused by him, the points earned were reduced by a large part. The points have almost stopped increasing in the past 2 days. But these are enough to increase his strength a lot. Open the exchange list of them all. Sumo was dazzled by the various mutant abilities. Storm, obtained the ability to control celestial phenomena, points required for redemption, 30,000 points. Teleport, you can teleport to any location you have visited before. Points required for redemption, 30,000 points. Sand transformation, you can control the yellow sand at will. You can also transform yourself into sand, and you are immune to a certain degree of physical attacks. Points required for redemption, 30,000 points. Duplication, can generate up to 100 duplications. Duplication is controlled by the main body. The damage suffered by the main body can be transferred to duplication. Points required for redemption, 30,000 points. Overwhelming self-confidence, gain the ability to be extremely confident. You are the only one in heaven and on earth. As a side effect, spikes will grow on your body. Points required for redemption, 100,000 points. Various abilities are good, but mutant abilities are derived from the X gene and are too easy to be restrained. Even if he is as strong as Magneto, he will instantly become an ordinary person after being shot by the mutant antidote. Compared with mutant ability, the power gained through practice is different. There is no need to be afraid of being restrained, and the upper limit is much higher than the ability of these mutants. After browsing for a while, Sumo's eyes moved. Spiritual core can be integrated into the mind, release mental power independently, and be promoted to the master of the god's telekinesis. The mental power contained in it can enable the host to reach the peak of the God of War level. Points required for redemption, 30,000 points, that's it. In an instant, Sumo made a decision. After deducting 30,000 points, a dark golden ball appeared in his hand. Spherical soybeans file size, looks like an illusion. Following the system prompts, Sumo touched the ball to the center of his eyebrows. In an instant, the ball disappeared in his hand. Sumo felt a sharp tingling sensation in his mind. I felt dizzy. When Sumo appeared again, he was already standing in a vast white space. Not far in front of you, a file-sized black tower was slowly rotating. It was the star tower that you had obtained earlier. Episode 13, The God's Telekinesis Master, Conscious Space? Sumo guessed. After all, he had watched the star tower sink into the center of his eyebrows with his own eyes before. At this time, he also noticed that the dark golden ball that had just disappeared was floating above the star tower. Before he could figure out the situation, the dark golden ball seemed to be stimulated, gradually accelerating its rotation, and large amounts of dense air continued to emanate from the ball. Psychic power? From the systematic explanation, we know that the amount of mental power released by the mental protonucleus has a great relationship with one's own physical strength. His current warrior strength is that of a junior warrior. The strength of the god's telekinesis master is at most 2 levels higher than that of a warrior. In other words, now the spiritual core can directly release spiritual power, raising the strength of his master to the level of a high-level warrior. After only pausing in the conscious space for a moment, Sumo's consciousness returned to his body. As soon as he returned to his body, severe pain was like a tide, instantly flooding his consciousness. After gritting his teeth and holding on for less than a quarter of an hour, Sumo rolled his eyes and fainted. After he fainted, the release of energy from the dark golden ball in his mind did not stop, and it was still rapidly increasing his mental power. I don't know how much time passed. The speed at which the mental core in his mind releases mental power has slowed down and gradually become stable. Sumo also slowly opened his eyes after trembling his fingers. I fainted? Wait, this is it? There was a look of surprise on his face. There was no other reason. At this time, all the disturbances within a radius of 100 meters clearly appeared in his mind. Sumo could clearly see the textures on the wings of the servants who cleaned the villa, Wanda who planted the plants in the garden, and even the butterflies flying among the flowers. This feeling is so wonderful. It was as if the world was under his control. Of course, he also knew that this was just his illusion. Withdrawing his perception, Sumo focused his gaze on a dumbbell on the shelf opposite him. Something moved in my heart. The dumbbell seemed to be grasped by a pair of invisible hands and floated slowly. Is this psychokinesis? Next, Sumo's eyes scanned the various machines in the gym, and the machines he scanned floated one by one. Until half a minute later, the gym seemed to be in space, and all the equipment in the room, even the treadmills and bench presses, were floating. Until this moment, Sumo still felt at ease. Open the properties panel. After putting these things back in their place, Sumo thought silently in his heart. Name, Sumo. Age, 20 years old. Strength, 15,360 kilograms. Speed, 118 meters/s. Psychokinesis, 61600 kg. Ability, none. Points, 1960 points. First, the physical strength increased from 10 tons to 15 tons. Looking at it this way, the improvement of mental strength will also lead to the improvement of physical fitness. Sumo had expected this and didn't show much surprise on his face. Until his eyes fell on the column of telepathy. 61 tons. Seeing this number, Sumo's eyes showed shock. This is already more than 4 times the physical strength. You must know that the early strength standard of the god of war was only 64 tons. Now he is not too far away from this. After taking a long breath, Sumo gradually calmed down. Became a master of the god's telekinesis. If he faced the red tank from last time again, he was confident that he would be able to kill the opponent effortlessly. After all, masters can fly. Although psychokinesis has no way of affecting the physical body, it can fly by stepping on a weapon. Thinking of this, Sumo opened them all again and planned to choose some weapons. But after only watching for a moment, he closed them all with an ugly expression. There is no way, it is too expensive. With his current points, he can't even buy a few throwing knives with the minimum materials. Now his mental psychokinesis is very close to the primary god of war. Therefore, for weapons, you need to purchase at least 7 series throwing knives. A 7 series flying knife requires 500 points, and a 9 series flying knife that can reach the peak of the god of war requires 1000 points. With all the points he has now, he can't buy 2. With his current strength, he can control 4 flying knives at the same time while ensuring accuracy. These alone cost 4000 points. It's not that low-level flying knives cannot be used, but when he uses all his strength, they will be easily damaged and become disposable items. Just imagine that 60 tons of power are concentrated on a flying knife. If the material is not enough, I am afraid that it will be scrapped if it touches something with high hardness. Etc. Sumo suddenly thought of something and asked about the system in his mind. If the vibranium and adamantium in this world are cast into flying knives, how many series would they be equivalent to? 9 series. The system's emotionless voice sounded in Sumo's mind. Hearing this answer, Sumo's eyes lit up. Brotherhood headquarters. A group of people walked into a circular hall, pushing a box that was more than 2 meters high. The hall was surrounded by mutants. Magneto stepped down from a seat directly in front of him. He reached out and brushed against the outer wall of the box. Here are all the US dollars that the Kingpin collected during this period? That's right. A young man with yellow hair, who walked in with the box, nodded. Then press a switch on the box. The box opened slowly. It was neatly filled with US dollars. These total $500 million. Not enough, far from enough. Magneto looked at the pile of USD that was almost piled up in front of him. He was unmoved and instead spoke with a gloomy look. We are still far short of the funds needed to complete our plan." At this point, Eric was stunned. He turned to look at the hacker girl in the crowd. It seems that the man who killed Kingpin last time was also a rich man. The hacker girl nodded when she heard this. I tapped a few times on the computer in my hand, and then called up a piece of information. Sue Mo, CEO of Fox Film and Television Company, is also the second largest shareholder of Stark Group. He has shares in almost all of the well-known companies in the United States, but he sold them all some time ago. Despite this, the total assets under his name are worth more than $100 billion. After hearing the girl's words, people around them exclaimed in surprise. Most of these mutants come from the bottom of society. Naturally, they are very shocked when they hear this huge number. There was a smile on Magneto's face. As long as we have each other's support, we no longer have to worry about funding. As he spoke, he waved his hand, and a pair of metal knives and forks flew out from somewhere in the room, stopping on top of his palm and spinning slowly. I think the other party should be very willing to support our mutant cause. Of course, all this needs to wait until my ability is fully restored. Episode 14, Black Marketeers and Saber-Toothed Tigers, African Coast. Solve a giant marina. In a dismantling yard where dilapidated ships are parked. A helicopter landed slowly. Sue Mo walked out of the helicopter wrapped tightly and looked at the ship with dense gunshots in the distance with confusion. Someone got there first? This is where Ultron obtained the vibranium. And the black market businessman here, Ulysses, has vibranium smuggled from Wakanda. It is also currently the easiest place to obtain vibranium. In fact, when it comes to making weapons, adamantium is more suitable than vibranium. Vibranium has the effect of buffering kinetic energy and is more suitable as a material for making armor. Adamantium is indestructible and is the best material for making weapons. As for throwing knives, adamantium is of course more suitable. Unfortunately, the adamantium formula has disappeared along with Stryker's Yakley base. It is not easy to find it. Sue Mo can only settle for the next best thing and choose vibranium. Thinking of this, Sue Mo did not hesitate, his figure flashed and flew towards the ship. Inside the ship at this time, the short Ulysses, protected by his men, looked at a middle-aged man in the distance with fear. The middle-aged man's palm had transformed into 2 huge amounts of tiger claws. Drops of blood dripped from the tips of the claws. Behind him, 2 bodies were lying on the ground. The man also had several bloody holes on his body. But as time goes by, the wounds on his body were healing rapidly, and the bullets in the wounds were also squeezed out, followed by the sound of a dense burst of bullets falling to the ground. The wounds on the man's body have recovered as before. Mutants? Seeing this situation, Ulysses quietly took a few steps back, glanced at the gunmen around him, and gained some sense of security in his heart. I think I have made it very clear. If you want vibranium, just pay for it. The mutant opposite obviously refused to accept this suggestion. The lowered head gradually lifted up, staring at Ulysses with beast-like eyes. Seeing this look, Ulysses immediately realized that the person on the other side obviously didn't seem to be able to communicate. Then he waved his right hand. Kill him. After giving the order, Ulysses turned around and retreated back. The surrounding gunmen pressed the triggers in their hands. A dense storm of bullets swept through. When the smoke cleared, the mutants had disappeared. In a room on the ground floor of the ship, Ulysses held a pistol and listened to what was going on outside. There are also several gunmen guarding the room. This room contains all the vibranium he has stolen from Wakanda over the past few years, worth more than $1 billion. It is obviously impossible for him to let such a large amount of wealth be snatched away by the other party. Wait until the gunfire outside stops. There was a look on his face. Dead? Waving to a subordinate on the side, the gunman clenched his pistol and walked towards the door, intending to go out and investigate. But he just walked to the door. Boom! There was an explosion, and the door flew straight in. The gunman who was just about to go out was knocked to the ground by the alloy door panel. Blood flowed from his 7 orifices, and it seemed that he would not survive. Ulysses dodged the door panel and looked towards the door. The person standing outside the door was the mutant just now. After a burst of gunfire, then Ulysses felt a heat on his neck, and the other party's bloody claws were already on it. Several gunmen around them covered the bloody holes in their bodies and slowly fell to the ground. Vibranium. Leave it to me. The mutant man let out a beast-like roar, and Ulysses had no doubt that if he didn't hand over the vibranium, the other party would slit his neck in the next moment. Wait, I'll give it. Ulysses hurriedly pressed a button on the wall behind him. Enter your password on the keyboard that appears. A metal door slowly opened on both sides, and an elevator-like device descended from inside. Placed above are pieces of vibranium in transparent glass containers. All the vibranium is here, a total of 136 kilograms. Seeing the vibranium, the mutant pushed Ulysses away. Ulysses hurriedly left from the door. The mutant man ignored the other party, but stepped forward to check it, then put the vibranium into a bag and walked outside. Just walked to the door. A figure fell from the sky and hit the ground hard. Looking at the scene in the cabin, Sumo let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it's not too late. He glanced around the room and was stunned when he saw the mutant's weathered face and his hands that turned into giant claws. As the wounds on the man's body recovered quickly, several bullets were discharged from the wounds. Saber-toothed tiger? A name came to his mind. With this appearance, coupled with this powerful self-healing ability, Sumo guessed the identity of this mutant in an instant. Why is he here? After a brief moment of confusion, Sumo was relieved. This was a real world. Red tanks could get together with Kingpin. It seemed that there was nothing surprising about saber-toothed tigers appearing in this place. Get out of the way. Staring at Sumo, who was standing in front of him, the saber-toothed tiger made a deep sound from his mouth. See the other person's eyes that don't contain any emotion. Controlled? Sumo guessed. Thinking of this, he didn't intend to talk nonsense to the other party. The figure disappeared in a flash. The saber-toothed tiger felt his eyes blur. Before he could react, a black fist as big as a sandbag had appeared in front of him. A huge force came. The saber-toothed tiger only felt numbness on his face, and then his body became like a rocket, knocking through several layers of steel plates and then lifted into the air. Strong physical fitness, coupled with super self-healing ability that is not afraid of firearms. Compared to ordinary people, Victor, the saber-toothed tiger, is almost unsolvable. But unfortunately, he met Sumo. Sumo's strong physical fitness is simply not enough in the face of Sumo's more than 30 tons of strength after the amplitude bonus and the speed of more than 100 meters per second. Ulysses led his group of gunmen to the door of the room, and happened to see the scene in front of him, with a look on his face. Who are you? Sumo ignored the other party, but stepped forward, picked up the bag left by the saber-toothed tiger on the ground, and opened it to take a look. After confirming that it was indeed what he wanted, a smile appeared on his face. Hey man, that's my thing, give it back to me. Ulysses saw Sumo's actions, and said quickly. Judging from the other party's actions, it was obvious that they were also targeting vibranium. Give it back to you? I robbed it based on my ability, why should I give it back to you? Sumo said confidently. Hearing this, Ulysses was speechless for a moment. Man, you don't seem to be able to understand the situation in front of you. I advise you to be more knowledgeable. As he spoke, he waved his hand, and the guns in the hands of these men were pointed at Sumo. If you know what's going on, put down what you're holding. Sumo turned around slowly after hearing this, and glanced at the group of people. In addition to vibranium, these people are also of great use to him. After all, these are all points. Episode 15, Vibranium obtained, secret base, just when Sumo was about to take action. Boom. The figure of the saber-toothed tiger Victor jumped out from the side. He rushed towards Sumo. Roll. Sumo raised his foot and kicked the opponent away. Like a sandbag, Victor flew directly into the cabin on the side. In less than 2 seconds, the other party jumped out again. Look at the other party still alive and kicking. Sumo shook his head. Self-healing ability is indeed a bit troublesome, but do you think there's nothing you can do about it? But before he could take action again, Ulysses, who was being ignored, showed an angry look on his face. Asshole. His right hand waved violently. Everyone fire at me. After receiving his order, the group of men looked at the two people standing in the distance and were a little at a loss. The deputy standing next to him hesitated for a moment, and then asked in a low voice. Boss, which one to fight? Ulysses slapped him angrily. Of course I'll beat them both, and they'll all die. After receiving his order, the gunmen under his command no longer hesitated and pulled the triggers one after another. In an instant, there was loud gunfire, and the cabin became filled with smoke. The bullets fired at Sumo all hovered in the air less than 1 meter away from him. Victor, on the other hand, instantly had more than a dozen bloody holes on his body. The irritated Victor let out an angry roar, gave up his silence, and rushed towards the gunman. When Sumo saw this, he came first and stopped in front of Victor. If you want to steal my head, get out of here. The right fist struck Victor in the face, and at the same time 4 flying knives flew out from his back. Under the influence of telekinesis, they turned into an afterimage and shuttled through the cabin. The moment his right hand touched Victor's skin, the two forces of gravity are naturally transferred from the arm to the fist and are superimposed together. 30 tons of power instantly exploded on Victor's face. Boom! Victor's face exploded directly in Sumo's hands. Under the huge amounts of power, the figure disappeared in a flash and disappeared into the cabin in the distance. After the flying knife on the other side entered the crowd, those gunmen were like cutting wheat, and a large piece fell down in a moment. Points plus 80 points. Points plus 60 points. The system prompts kept ringing in Sumo's ears. Less than 10 seconds. The people around them all fell to the ground, and blood flowed out from the wounds on their necks, dyeing the ground red. The flying knife without a trace of blood was suspended next to Sumo. These flying knives were made of titanium alloy by Sumo, and they were more than enough to deal with these ordinary people. Sumo walked up to the only survivor present, Ulysses. Ulysses had been so frightened by the hellish scene around him that he collapsed to the ground. Devil, you are a devil. Thank you for the compliment. As a thank you, I'll send you to reunite with your men. After saying that, Sumo stretched out his hand to strangle the other person's neck and gently exerted force. Crack. Kill the villain and get 2,000 points. Open the system panel and check it out. After clearing out all these arms dealers, the points have accumulated to more than 6,000 points. In other words, in less than a minute, nearly 5,000 points were obtained. Close the panel. Sumo walked towards the saber-toothed tiger that had just been knocked away. Although his face exploded directly under the blow just now. But judging from his previous resilience, this was nothing to the saber-toothed tiger. Sure enough, the other party was no longer in the cabin. The other party seemed to realize that there was no benefit in his hands and ran away directly. Sumo, who had expected it, did not panic, picked up the vibranium in the cabin and left directly. After returning to the helicopter, Sumo took out a tablet. After some operations above, a map appears on the screen. 2 light spots, one red and one blue, kept flashing on the map. The red dot is exactly where he is. The blue dot is the location of the saber-toothed tiger. At the beginning of the fight, Sumo had already placed a pocket locator on Victor's body. You can see it from before. It seems that the more powerful people you kill, the more points you get. Ordinary people only have a few dozen points at most. An extremely powerful person like Kingpin can stand up to hundreds of nearly ordinary people. It can be seen from the dull expression of the saber-toothed tiger before that the opponent is probably controlled by a mutant with psychic ability. There aren't many mutants with mind control abilities. Those who can control the saber-toothed tiger are even rarer. And it is obvious that anyone who can do such a thing cannot be a decent person. This means that after killing the opponent, he can get a large amount of points. Of course, the most important thing is, there is a star tower in the consciousness sea, and he can almost be regarded as the nemesis of these mind-controlling mutants. Soon, he saw the blue dot on the tablet moving at a sudden speed, then leaving the African continent at a very fast speed and moving in the direction of the United States. Sumo's private plane also took off a few minutes later. He chased in the direction the blue dot left. A few hours later, the blue dot on the tablet stopped. Sumo looked at the location of the blue dot. Located in a mountain range in Florida. In order to prevent being discovered by the radar of the opponent's aircraft, Sumo's private plane had just entered the airspace of the United States. However, Sumo had no plans to take a private plane there. The private jet lands at the nearest airport. Half an hour before the plane landed, Sumo had already left the plane. Outskirts of the Appalachian Mountains. A plane slowly landed on a platform halfway up the mountain. After a while, the saber-toothed tiger and a middle-aged man walked down from above. The two walked to the mountain wall of the platform, and an alloy door of huge amounts embedded in the mountain wall slowly opened. After entering the interior, after passing through a long corridor, there is a huge amount of laboratory. The walls around the laboratory are all made of glass. Behind the glass are small cells-like cells. In each room, there is a strange-looking mutant imprisoned. These mutants were tied to a metal operating table, and almost all of them were surrounded by several figures in white coats. Most of the mutants are in a coma and do not know whether they are alive or dead. The only few mutants who remained awake had a hint of hollowness and numbness in their eyes. The two of them passed through countless alloy doors. Standing in front of an old man in his 50s or 60s. What, failed? The old man looked at the two people standing in front of him with anger on his face. Waste, what a waste, you can't even handle this little thing. Sorry, Dr. Phil. Facing the other party's anger, the middle-aged man apologized quietly, while the saber-toothed tiger standing beside him had a dull look on his face. Seeing the dull look on the saber-toothed tiger's face, Dr. Phil became even more angry. When he stepped forward, there was a flurry of punches and kicks. It wasn't until I felt some soreness in my fist that I gradually stopped. Panting, he sat down aside. Asshole, there is no way to transfer the self-healing factor into my body without the equipment built by adamantium. No, we must be able to find replacement metal. With that said, he stood up and walked towards the laboratory. Episode 16, Mutant Research Base. Before Phil could walk out of the room, a piercing alarm sounded in the room. His expression changed and he turned to look at the surveillance screen on the wall. Suddenly, he saw a tightly wrapped figure descending from the sky on the top of the mountain where the base was located. It's him, it's him. The middle-aged man standing aside tremblingly looked at the familiar figure in the surveillance screen and let out a scream. After hearing this, Phil was not surprised, but happy. You mean, vibranium is in his hands? That's right. The middle-aged man nodded. He was the one who took away the vibranium after injuring the saber-toothed tiger. Phil's eyes lit up. You are so courageous. You stole the vibranium and then you dare to follow me. Hearing this, the middle-aged man also reacted and looked towards the saber-toothed tiger. After a while, he found a soybean file-sized locator from his pocket. There was a look of horror on his face. I'm sorry, doctor, it was my negligence. No. Phil shook his head. You did great. After speaking, he pressed a button on the wall. In an instant, a piercing siren sounded throughout the base. A soldier with a gun in his hand poured out from various rooms in the base and all gathered towards the entrance of the base. Outside, Sumo, who landed on the top of the mountain and was gradually approaching the entrance of the base, immediately saw the soldiers rushing out of the base. Discovered? Seeing the soldiers gathering quickly, Sumo reacted immediately. Now that he was discovered, he was too lazy to hide and seek with the other party. A thought came to my mind. The soldiers who had just ran out of the door immediately felt an irresistible force coming from the firearms in their hands, and the firearms flew out of everyone's hands in an instant. Then the guns were lined up like soldiers. They were neatly arranged in the air, their guns pointed at their previous owners. Seeing this scene, those soldiers instantly lost their souls. Without hesitation, he turned around and ran back. However, their speed is obviously too slow. Just as he turned around, the triggers of those firearms seemed to be pressed. Da-da-da. Intense gunfire echoed in the corridor, mixed with screams. After the magazines and the firearms were emptied, the armed forces in the entire base were almost wiped out. Sumo then entered the base. 4 flying knives flew out from behind him and hovered around his body. The researchers who had long known that the base had been invaded all transformed into combat units, each holding a gun and aiming at the door. As the sound of footsteps got closer and closer, Sumo stepped into the laboratory. As soon as he entered, he glanced through the transparent glass around the laboratory and looked at the mutants as experimental subjects in the back room. Research on mutants in vivo? Sumo frowned and looked at the researchers in the distance with a cold look in his eyes. When the researchers saw Sumo walking in, they pulled the trigger almost simultaneously. Unfortunately, Sumo's reaction was not slow either. Psychokinesis loomed over the group of researchers. The moment the opponent pressed the trigger, the muzzles of their pistols seemed to be squeezed by some force and converged toward the center. In an instant, the sounds of exploding barrels sounded one after another. Screams came from the room. At the same time, the flying knives hovering around Sumo flew towards the people lying on the ground. In less than half a minute, the room became quiet. This scene clearly appeared on the surveillance camera on the wall of Phil's office. Dr. Phil stood there with a dull expression. Magneto? Impossible, absolutely impossible. There was a look of disbelief on his face. No matter in terms of height or body shape, the other person doesn't look like Magneto. Moreover, as far as he knew, Magneto seemed to have lost his mutant ability. Ordinary people may not know much about it, but to them, the fact that Magneto was injected with the mutant antidote is not a secret. The devil, it must be the devil. At this time, the middle-aged man who was still in the room fell to the ground with a thud and let out a scream. This cry actually woke Dr. Phil up. Shut up. After scolding the other party, he turned around and went to the back of the office, took out a small suitcase from the safe in the corner, got up and fled towards the back of the base. The situation is obvious now. If we don't leave now, I'm afraid we won't be able to leave. When he reached the door, he turned his head and gave an order to the saber-toothed tiger. Follow me. After that, he and the saber-toothed tiger left together. He tried his best to obtain the self-healing factor in the saber-toothed tiger's body, so naturally he would not abandon him. The middle-aged man paralyzed on the ground also reacted at this time. He quickly got up from the ground using his hands and feet. Doctor, take me away. With that said, he chased after the other party in the direction he left. Roll. After a gunshot, the middle-aged man fell in a pool of blood. At this time, there was no one visible in the base near the entrance. Suemo entered the base. He just glanced around briefly. Could this be a secret base of Hydra? The various researchers and well-equipped soldiers in the base allowed Suemo to come up with this guess. There is no pause. He dodged directly and rushed towards the depths of the base. After seeing everything in the base, Suemo also realized that his previous guess was obviously not accurate. This is obviously a secret organization that studies mutants. His whereabouts have been exposed, and coupled with the destruction of the armed forces in the base, in this case, the person in charge of the base is likely to choose to escape. They must be intercepted before the other party escapes. Less than half a minute. Suemo followed the passage to a small platform at the back of the mountain range. On the platform at this time, the saber-toothed tiger stood in front of a zipline extending toward the foot of the mountain. In the distance, someone seemed to be hanging on the zipline and rowing downwards. Seeing the saber-toothed tiger, who also had the hook hanging on his body and was about to leave, Suemo thought. No matter how hard the saber-toothed tiger exerted himself, the zipline would not move at all. Until then, the saber-toothed tiger also noticed Suemo appearing behind him. After letting out a roar, the saber-toothed tiger tore off the hook on his body and rushed towards Suemo. Having discovered the opponent's lair, Suemo naturally had no intention of letting him offend again. Moreover, the owner of the base is fleeing quickly, and he has no time to delay here. Twice the power, spiritual psychokinesis blessing. With his right hand wearing a metal glove, he made a fist and smashed it towards the opponent. Mental psychokinesis has no way to act on the physical body, and will penetrate directly after contacting the physical body. To facilitate the blessing of psychokinesis and flight, he specially built a suit made of metal. The physical strength is 15 tons, twice the force is 30 tons, plus 61 tons of mental psychokinesis blessing. At this moment, the power of his right fist was close to 100 tons. The moment he punched, a burst of huge amounts of air echoed on the platform. The fist struck the saber-toothed tiger's body as fast as lightning. The saber-toothed tiger paused, and his body paused in the air as if a pause button had been pressed. Immediately afterwards, his body exploded instantly like a punctured balloon. Points plus 12,000. The voice of the system sounded in his mind. But he didn't have time to check. He jumped up and chased in the direction of the zipline. Episode 17, Battle Armor, Storage Ring, at the foot of the mountain. Dr. Phil rode the zipline and stopped in a clearing in a dense forest. As soon as he untied the hook on his body, the man heard a sound of the air being cut in the sky behind him. Turning his head to look, he immediately saw that familiar figure chasing in his direction. After Dr. Phil made an angry sound, he hurriedly ran to a wooden house in the open space. After a while, an off-road vehicle roared out and rushed out in the opposite direction of Suemo. Dr. Phil, who was driving the vehicle, saw the figure approaching at great speed in the rearview mirror. In his anxiety, he stepped on the accelerator of the vehicle to the bottom. But obviously, no matter how good the performance of the car is, it cannot be as good as flying units in this kind of terrain. At this time, Suemo was less than 50 meters away from him. Dr. Phil took a pistol from the car, stretched his left hand holding the gun out of the window, and shot Suemo in the sky. Unfortunately, pistol bullets do not pose any threat to Suemo now. Suemo easily dodged all the bullets. Instead, Dr. Mayfair was so distracted that he completely failed to notice a fallen tree lying in the middle of the road ahead. By the time he saw it and tried to dodge, it was already too late. Click. The car, which was traveling at nearly 150 kilometers per hour, hit a tree and successfully took off. After rolling for a while, the car flew towards the dense forest on the roadside. Finally, the car was placed on a big tree next to it. Dr. Phil in the car shook his head hard, trying to clear his dizzy brain. Just at this time, Suemo caught up from behind, slowly floating directly in front of the car. Suemo looked at Dr. Phil, whose face was covered in blood in the cab of the car, and the corners of his mouth raised slightly. "Sir, this is not a good place to park." After saying that, he flew up and kicked the car down from the tree. "No." Feeling the weightlessness, the doctor screamed with horror on his face. You must know that at this time, the height of the car from the ground is at least 7 or 8 meters. If the landing posture is wrong, he may just tell you here. However, the moment the car was about to touch the ground, it was directly supported by an inexplicable force. Suemo used psychokinesis to control the vehicle and slowly fall to the ground. He stepped forward and pulled down the deformed door, then pulled the other person out of the cab and threw it on the ground aside. Do you want to introduce yourself directly, or do you want to wait until I torture you? I said. After experiencing a series of stimulations, Dr. Phil's heart was already a little broken. He hurriedly started to introduce himself. As he spoke, Suemo also understood the identity of this person. His name is Phil Andrew, a former researcher under Stryker. In the last battle that destroyed Lake Yakle, he escaped because he was not in the base. Over the years, he secretly developed a technology that could transfer healing factors into saber-toothed tigers. After that, he designed to capture the saber-toothed tiger, and then used the remaining control potions in his hand to control the saber-toothed tiger. The purpose is to transfer the other party's healing factors into one's own body. This transfer technology requires the use of adamantium. He does have the recipe for adamantium. But one of the most important materials is missing. Vibranium. After many investigations, he found Ulysses. This is what happened before. Do you have the recipe for adamantium? That's right. And the rest of the metals needed to synthesize adamantium have been gathered in the previous laboratory. As long as there is vibranium, adamantium can be synthesized directly. The other party quickly explained. Obviously, he hopes that by showing his value, the other party will spare his life. Suemo raised his lips slightly. Although I made a mistake in my judgment, I didn't encounter the mind control mutants I expected here, so I gained points. But if you can get the adamantium formula, your time is not wasted. At that moment, he called Avril Lavigne and asked her to transport the vibranium left on the private plane. He picked up Phil with one hand and flew towards the location of the previous laboratory. The next day, a plane slowly rose from the Appalachian Mountains and disappeared into the sky at high speed. A moment later, there was a violent explosion. In the cabin, Suemo looked at a complete set of armor made of adamantium and vibranium in front of him. Different from Tony's. His equipment, which is entirely made of vibranium, is more appropriately called armor. This armor is dark black in color, streamlined, and does not contain any electronic components inside. After all, with the presence of psychokinesis, he does not need those power assistance systems. The main function of this armor is to protect and facilitate his psychokinesis control. 16 flying knives made of adamantium are distributed on both sides of the armor's legs and arms. In addition to the flying knife, he also built a combat knife for close combat. The sword is also made of adamantium, and there is a scabbard specially designed to hold the sword on the back of the armor. Open the system store. After a lot of fighting, his points now have reached 27,000. First, I searched for storage equipment in the mall. Soon, a list appeared in front of him. Storage ring, level F, contains 1,000 cubic meters of space, points required for redemption, 3,000 points. Storage ring, E level, contains 1 million cubic meters of space, points required for redemption, 20,000 points. Storage ring, SS level, contains 1 million cubic kilometers of space, points required for redemption, 300,000 points. World Lord World, D level, refined from the World Lord Small World, the space has a diameter of 100,000 kilometers and can store living creatures. Points required for redemption, 1 million points. God's Kingdom Crystal, D level, it is refined by God's Kingdom after the death of an ordinary immortal strongman. There is a file-size space with a diameter of 1 million kilometers inside. Points required for redemption, 10 million points. The various storage items on the list made Sumo's eyes warm. Not to mention anything else, the D-level World Lord alone can fit the entire Earth into it. After all, the diameter of the Earth is only over 10,000 kilometers. However, the points needed for redemption later made Suemo calm down. After thinking for a while, he only exchanged it for an F-level storage ring. The current points are limited and should be used to improve strength. Moreover, the things redeemed by the system can be stored in the system space. The storage space of 1,000 cubic meters is enough for him for the time being. A space of 10 meters in length, width, and height. Ordinary family cars can fit hundreds of them. Congratulations to the host, you have obtained an F-level storage ring, which cost 3,000 points. Episode 18, Hill Agent. The system prompt has just gone off. An ordinary ring appeared in his hand. The ring is just an ordinary ring shape, and you can't tell what material it is made of. Putting the ring on his finger, he then explored psychokinesis towards the ring. After psychokinesis came into contact with the ring, he instantly sensed a square space with a length, width and height of 10 meters, and the shape of the space could be changed at will as he wished. Good. Suemo nodded with satisfaction. With a slight wave towards the armor on the side, the armor appeared in the storage ring. By the time Suemo returned home, it was already close to noon. Just after returning to the villa, a servant came up to report that a man claiming to be an FBI agent was visiting. FBI? A trace of doubt appeared on Sumo's face. In the past, his only interaction with the FBI was that every time he watched a movie, he would be warned by the other party at the beginning. As for seeing a real person, this is really the first time. A few minutes later, in the reception room, a tall woman sat across from Suemo. The woman was wearing a black tights, which outlined her beautiful figure. Her hair was neatly tied behind her head, and she had a pair of blue eyes, looking at Suemo with a hint of curiosity. Hello, my name is Maria Hill, from the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency. Before she came, she thought that Sue would be a tall, muscular man with arms as thick as thighs. After all, she knew Jean Bin's information very well. To be able to kill a Kingpin who is covered in muscles, at least the opponent's size should be no different. But I never thought that the other person was such a well-proportioned man with fair skin. After the two shook hands, Sumo's eyes showed a hint of surprise. No wonder when I first saw the other party, I looked familiar. It was only when I heard the name that I realized that the other party was Agent Hill, the second largest commander in S.H.I.E.L.D. In an instant, he also figured out the context. Obviously, S.H.I.E.L.D. learned the news about killing Kingpin from the Black Widow Natasha Romanoff. He could also guess the other party's purpose. It's nothing more than persuading myself to join S.H.I.E.L.D. Sure enough, the other party's first sentence confirmed his guess. Mr. Sue, I am here this time on behalf of the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau to invite you to join. Hill handed the information in his hand to Suemo with a serious look. Suemo took the information from the other party's hand, glanced at it casually, and then threw it on the table in front of him. Then he chuckled and looked at Hill opposite. Leave the life of a rich man and risk your life to fight those gangsters? Ms. Hill, I don't think this is a good idea. Regarding Sumo's rejection, Hill did not show any surprise. Thinking from his perspective, if she were the other party, she would not be able to join this organization. Smiling, she took out a tablet from her bag and opened a video on it. Handed to Suemo. I think you will change your mind after reading this. Sumo's expression changed. He reached out to take the computer from the other person's hand, and looked at it carefully. The scene in the video is in a hall. It was filled with mutants of different shapes, and judging from the situation, they seemed to be discussing something. Judging from the shooting angle, it should have been secretly taken by a mutant. An old man wearing a metal helmet sat above the hall. Magneto, Brotherhood. Almost instantly, Suemo guessed that it was the scene inside the Brotherhood. What they were discussing was exactly how to make him a member of the Brotherhood of Mutants. Of course, their main goal is the huge property owned by Suemo. After watching the video, Sumo's face darkened. He was not too surprised that the organization behind Kingpin and Red Tank was the Brotherhood of Mutants. He had made some guesses about this before. But what puzzled him was why the other party was so eager to get a large amount of funds. Could it be that they are planning another big move? Originally, I was too lazy to care about the other party. If something happened, the X-Men would naturally stop them, but since the plot was on me, don't blame yourself for being rude. Fortunately, I got the news in advance. Otherwise, you never know when you will be plotted by the other party. How about, if you join us, we can help you deal with these people. Agent Hill continued to advise. I'm afraid I'll help you. SHIELD cannot sit idly by when these mutants are causing trouble. After all, the original intention of their establishment was to deal with these anti-human organizations. To put it mildly, it was to help themselves. In fact, he just wanted to use himself to deal with these mutants. Regarding Sumo's purpose of seeing through them, Agent Hill did not show any surprise on his face, but looked at him seriously. It makes no difference. After all, they do threaten your safety, don't they? Suemo thought for a moment and looked up at Hill. Indeed, what you said is correct. But it's a pity that I don't plan to join any organization, but we can cooperate. Oh? What kind of cooperation? Hill looked stunned for a moment, then asked. This time I can join forces with you to deal with these mutants. As a thank you for providing information this time, I can take action once and help you deal with some difficult troubles. Of course, if the cooperation is happy, we can conduct such transactions in the future. Every time you provide me with the information I need, I can help you take action. After this incident, Sumo also realized the importance of intelligence. If Hill hadn't come looking for him, he might have suffered a hidden loss. Although SHIELD has almost become Serpentine and S.H.I.E.L.D., it is undeniable that except for the information about Hydra that may be false, the other intelligence networks about the various forces are still very powerful. Besides, you won't suffer any loss by doing this. Those who need to be dealt with by SHIELD are most likely not good people. He originally needed to deal with these people to gain points. In this way, not only can I deal with these people with help, but I don't have to worry about the aftermath at all. It's like killing two birds with one stone. Hearing this, Hill opposite him shook his head. I need to seek the opinion of our commander on this matter. Certainly. Sumo nodded. Let Hill take the phone and walk out of the room. Less than 10 minutes. Hill came back again. A pleasure to work with, I will be your only contact from now on. No one in SHIELD will know any information about you except me and the director. By the way, someone will send you information about the Brotherhood of Mutants later. After sending Hill away, Sumo sat there and meditated. Now he's on the Brotherhood's radar. Since the other party wants to take action against him, he will not sit still and wait for death. Although, in the movie universe alone, the power shown by Lao Wan at his peak was able to move several thousand tons of nuclear submarines. But in a real fight, it's hard to say who will win. After all, psychokinesis can control almost any object, and his body is much stronger than his opponent. Moreover, he still has a powerful weapon in his hand to deal with them. Thinking of this, Sumo came to the study room on the top floor of the villa. When he came to the bookshelf, he pressed a button hidden behind the book. The bookshelf slowly moved aside, revealing a room of about 30 square meters behind. Step into the room. The walls inside the room are filled with all kinds of firearms. Desert Eagle, M500 revolver, AK, Remington shotgun, Barrett heavy sniper. These are all collected by Sumo over the years. With a gentle wave of his right hand, he put these firearms into the storage ring. After collecting them, Sumo came to the innermost low-temperature refrigerator that was half a person tall. Opening the box, apart from a few special firearms, there were square magazines neatly arranged in the rest of the boxes. Take one out and open the magazine. What are neatly arranged inside are not bullets, but tiny needles. Episode 19, Taking 1,000 Years of Willowwood Heart, take out a syringe. The needle tube is filled with a light yellow liquid. These were all obtained by Sumo through special means 2 years ago, mutant antidote. As an ordinary person before, he naturally had to use some trump cards to deal with mutants. This thing, combined with his mental psychokinesis, is simply unstoppable for mutants. Receive all the thousands of syringes in the box into the storage ring. He has already tested it with a watch. The time in the storage ring is in a static state, so there is no need to worry about it deteriorating. With this thing in hand, he is not afraid of any mutants. As soon as I finished packing these things, there was a sound of the door opening and closing outside. Honey, what are you doing? Hearing this familiar voice, Sumo's eyes moved. This does not seem to be Wanda's voice. After all, although the relationship between the two has eased a lot, the other party has never called her this way so far. When he walked out of the room where weapons were stored, he immediately saw a tall figure standing in front of the desk, looking at him with a smile on his face. Wait, why are you here? After seeing the man's face clearly, Sumo rubbed his eyes with a look of surprise on his face. The person in front of him was none other than his last girlfriend, Anne Hathaway. Seeing the look on Sumo's face, Annie chuckled and stepped forward. Put your hands around the back of his neck. Why can't I show up here? No. Before he could finish speaking, Annie came up directly. Don't be like this, my wife is downstairs. Wouldn't this be more exciting? By the time the two of them arrived downstairs, it was already half an hour later. The three of them were sitting at the dining table. It seems like someone from the FBI was looking for you just now. Did something happen? Wanda took a sip of soup and asked casually. Oh, it's nothing, just some routine inquiries because of Peter's matter. Sumo responded casually. Regarding SHIELD, he didn't intend to say anything. She is just an ordinary person now, it is better not to let her get involved in these things. After a pause, Sumo glanced at the two of them and asked, pretending not to care. You too. You don't know the employees of your company, do you? Wanda asked strangely. Of course I know each other, I mean, how did you two get together, and, it seems like you have a good relationship. When he was upstairs just now, he was led astray by Annie before he could ask. It wasn't until this moment that I asked the doubts in my heart. Oh, Annie, and we met at the company. Wanda looked up and glanced at him. Yeah. Suemo nodded. Some time ago, because Wanda was a little bored staying in the villa all day, she asked Suemo to arrange a position for her in the film and television company. Unexpectedly, the two of them became best friends. If there was no active calculation by Anne, he would not believe it 100%. But that's it, it's too late to say anything now. At this time, Suemo felt a silky feeling on his legs under the table. Look up. And winked at him. This little fairy is simply amazing. After an exciting lunch, Wanda sent Annie out. Throughout noon, Annie was always provoking him intentionally or unintentionally. Could it be that the other party has awakened some strange attribute? Force this thought out of my mind. After a while, Suemo looked at Wanda walking back. I'm afraid you need to go out and hide for a while. Although the Brotherhood's goal is its own assets and it is almost impossible to take action against Wanda and the others, Suemo has to prevent this from happening. Looking at Wanda, who looked confused, he explained the matter of the Brotherhood. I'm sorry, it's because of the two of us that we got into such trouble. A trace of apology appeared on Wanda's face. It's nothing, haven't you already compensated me? A hint of teasing flashed across Sumo's smiling face. Although Suemo got her person first without getting her heart, it turns out that after getting the other person's heart, he can indeed unlock some special gameplay. Hearing this, Wanda's face turned red instantly. I'll go upstairs to clean up. Suemo looked at the red car that disappeared from sight and breathed a sigh of relief. Later, he went to the gym on the top floor alone. He has asked people to clear out all the equipment in the gym, and it has now become his practice room. If you want to completely solve the Brotherhood's troubles, you still need to improve your strength as soon as possible. After redeeming the storage ring, he still had more than 20,000 points left. Open the mall list, enter the treasures that enhance your strength, and after searching for them, Suemo checked them one by one. Heart-shaped grass, after taking it, it slowly improves people's physical fitness. Points required for redemption, 300 points/plant, dragon blood, made from the heart blood of king-level dragon beasts. After use, physical fitness can be increased by 2 to 4 times. Valid at apprentice level, points required for redemption, 5,000 points. Millennium Willow Heart, the spirit of plants and trees, contains huge vitality energy. After taking it, it can greatly enhance your physical fitness and cell activity. Enhance the body's recovery ability, points required for redemption, 18,000 points. Bibo Marrow, after taking psychokinesis, the spirit will be greatly improved, points required for redemption, 100,000 points/drop. Red Flame Fruit, after taking it, your physical fitness will be greatly improved. Points required for redemption, 100,000 points/piece. There are so many treasures to choose from. Suemo was dazzled by what he saw. But after taking a look at the points, I actually didn't have much choice. After a while, Suemo sat cross-legged on the ground, with a 1-meter-long green crystal suspended in front of him. Is this the Millennium Willow Heart? I looked at the crystal carefully. The shell of the crystal is very hard, and there seems to be green liquid flowing inside. Suemo checked its instructions. The method of use is to break its hard shell and consume the liquid inside. He took out an adamantium flying knife and used it to lightly scratch the crystal shell, creating a small crack on it. Seeing the liquid inside pouring out from the crack, Suemo didn't hesitate and put the crystal directly to his mouth, letting the green jelly-like viscous liquid flow into his mouth. There is a fragrance of vegetation in the mouth. As soon as the liquid entered his body down his throat, he felt a cool breath spreading through his body. As this cool feeling flows through the body, physical fitness gradually improves. At the same time, the dark golden ball in his mind spun again, releasing streams of pure mental power. These mental powers were continuously absorbed by the brain, enhancing his mental psychokinesis. The two energies do not interfere with each other in his body, rapidly improving his strength. As his strength improved, Suemo also felt a special energy gradually penetrate into his body. Feel the endless feeling in your body after absorbing this energy. Is this what is called vital energy? As this energy seeps in, a warm feeling spreads throughout the body. In this soothing feeling, the rapid increase in strength is simply not too satisfying. Episode 20, The Peak of the God of War, The Hunted White Queen. The whole process lasted more than 2 hours. As the speed of improvement stopped, Suemo slowly opened his eyes. At this time, there was a layer of dark brown impurities attached to the surface of his skin. After cleaning these things first, I returned to the practice room feeling relaxed. Open the properties panel. Name, Suemo. Age, 20 years old. Strength, 93,560 kilograms, speed, 386 meters/s, psychokinesis, 387600 kg, special ability, none, points, 6,160 points. Sumo's eyes shone with excitement. The body exerts 93 tons of force and psychokinesis exerts 387 tons of force. Compared with before, it has increased by more than 6 times. Moreover, the Millennium Willow Heart also has a major effect, which is to enhance the body's recovery ability. Thinking of this, he took out a throwing knife and lightly scratched his arm. The sound of a dull knife cutting cowhide was heard, and a shallow white mark appeared on the arm where the adamantium flying knife had scratched. Seeing this scene, Sumo paused and let out a sound of surprise. Holy shit! Although I know that the so-called body improvement is an all-round improvement. But he didn't expect the defense to reach this level. You must know that although he only made a slight stroke, it was based on his power of more than 90 tons. Even if he has deliberately restrained himself, his strength is no less than a few hundred kilograms. Not to mention ordinary people, even steel would be cut like tofu under this power, but it would only leave a faint white mark on his skin. Judging from this level of defense, I'm afraid even a sniper rifle can't hurt him at all. After calming down his excitement, Sumo gradually increased the power on the flying knife. It wasn't until nearly 2 tons of force was used that a slender blood mark was scratched on the skin. But before the blood could flow out from the wound, the skin on both sides of the wound closed unusually quickly under his gaze. This resilience. Sumo's eyes moved. The recovery speed was much stronger than the recovery ability of the saber-toothed tiger he had seen before. So perverted. It can be said that a 1,000-year-old Lu Mushin directly increased his combat effectiveness by a dozen times. After a while, a figure flew out of the villa at extremely fast speeds. Sumo's current flying speed exceeds Mach 2. It's about 700 meters per second, and the speed is about 2,500 kilometers per hour. In less than 3 minutes, he arrived at a mountain range in New Jersey, more than 100 kilometers away from the villa. Less than half a minute had passed since Sumo took off. SHIELD headquarters. In Nick Fury's office, Coulson walked in hurriedly. Director, major crisis. After hearing this, Nick Fury's expression changed. The last time he heard this, Tony was still wearing a suit and fighting with Iron Overlord in the sky of New York. Coulson handed the tablet into his hand. A high-speed UFO was spotted over New York. Nick Fury looked at the data on the tablet. Mach 2, Tony Stark? No, I just got the news that Tony is staying in his Seaview villa. Since Tony Iron Man's identity was exposed, he has naturally become the focus of S.H.I.E.L.D. It locates the opponent's location almost 24 hours a day. This is why Coulson knew the flying figure was not Tony for the first time. Nick Fury reached out and slid his hand on the tablet, looking at the flight path of the UFO. Wait a minute, could it be him in this position? The starting location of the UFO was very close to Shimmer's villa by the Hudson River. He was almost sure of it. This UFO is probably related to Sumo. However, he did not intend to release the information about Sumo. In the past few years, he has also noticed that some forces have infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. It is better to keep some information secret, because he may not know when it will become a life-saving trump card for him. Thinking of this, he handed the tablet back to Coulson. Delete this incident from the recorder and pretend it never happened. Coulson had a surprised look on his face when he heard the other party's answer. However, as an agent, he did not question the director's order. After nodding, he left the room. Nick Fury looked at the closed door and sighed secretly in his heart. It seems that we need to re-examine the opponent's strength. Sumo, wearing battle armor, was floating in front of a rock wall in the mountains. He planned to experiment to see how far his strength had reached. After taking a deep breath, Sumo made a fist with his right hand and smashed it against the rock wall. With twice the power, plus about half of the psychokinesis blessing, nearly 400 tons of force hit the rock. There was an explosion of air. Boom! Huge amounts of explosions echoed throughout the mountains. On the rock wall, a huge amount of spider web was centered on his fist and slowly spread. As Sumo retracted his fist, it seemed to cause a chain reaction. The entire rock wall fell with a crashing sound, and a moment later, a huge hole with a diameter of hundreds of meters appeared on the rock wall. In the dense forest at the foot of the mountain, countless birds started to fly. He nodded with satisfaction. Now his physical strength can almost defeat Hulk and Spider-Man. After all, just like Spider-Man's most glorious achievement, stopping a moving train only requires more than 50 tons of force. Just when he was about to try psychokinesis to control the flying knife, the cyclone around the star tower in his mind made a slight fluctuation. At the same time, bursts of gunfire came from the dense forest in the distance. Suemo made a move. This is the first time that the star tower has fluctuated in such a long time after obtaining it. But after waiting for a while, nothing unusual appeared. Take a deep breath. According to his current strength, he is indeed still far from activating the star tower. Turn to look into the distance. The location of the gunshot was in the dense forest 1 kilometer away from him. Due to the obstruction of trees, I couldn't see clearly what was going on over there. After just a moment of hesitation, he moved and quietly flew in that direction. After a while, Suemo hid in the dense branches of a tree and looked towards the open space not far away. A group of robots, 7 or 8 meters tall, surrounded a woman in the middle with blonde hair and white clothes. The woman seemed to be seriously injured. Her right hand was covering her left shoulder, and there was a large blood stain on her clothes. He raised his head and glanced at the robots coming up around him. There was anger in the woman's eyes. In an instant, the skin on her body turned into dazzling diamonds, and she broke out in the direction Suemo came from. White Queen. Seeing this scene in front of him, Suemo, who was hiding among the trees, had a surprised look on his face. This ability is really special. As far as he knew, it seemed that only the White Queen in the world had this ability to become a diamond. The robots surrounding her are probably the famous Sentry robots. Combined with the previous fluctuations of the Star Tower, Suemo quickly understood. In addition to having the ability to turn into diamonds all over the body, White Queen also has the ability to telepathize like Professor X. The previous fluctuations in the Star Tower were probably due to the White Queen activating ability towards his position. After all, the noise he made before was not small, and it was normal for her to find out. As for the purpose, Suemo guessed that she might be asking for help here, or trying to control the people here to help her stop these Sentry robots. The White Queen, who was rushing towards Suemo, was blocked by the robot. After the body surface of these robots flipped for a while, the outer skin turned into diamond skin like the White Queen. Seeing this strange scene, Suemo was surprised. No wonder the mutants were finally cornered by these Sentry robots. This kind of ability is really too perverted. Ability to easily copy various mutants. Almost any mutant is disabled by relative ability. The White Queen was fighting left and right among these robots, but was unable to break through. Suemo, who was hiding in the tree branches, looked at the scene below. To save or not to save? Without any hesitation, Suemo made his choice. White Queen possesses alpha-level mutant ability, making her a very suitable helper in forming a force. With her ability, she doesn't have to worry about betrayal by her subordinates. Although the telepathy ability redemption points in the mall only require 30,000 points, Suemo has already checked with the system and found out that the redeemed abilities are in a state just after awakening. In other words, after redeeming this ability, it is in the initial state. It will take time to slowly gain control after that. With all this time, he might as well use it to practice the secret arts of the illusionist lineage that is a master of the gods' telekinesis. After all, that is more powerful than this telepathic ability.